Spare. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We continue with the analysis of Spare. Naturally, Harry's dead mother plays a huge part in his life, even 25 years after her death, and the impact that it's had upon him. In this section of the book, he has transported himself back to when he was told about her death. And this is the occasion when his father tells him about the fact that his mother has died. He explains that Charles is stood at the end of the bed in a dressing gown, a white dressing gown, making him seem like a ghost. He gave a half smile, averted his gaze. The room wasn't dark anymore, wasn't light either. Strange in between shade, almost brownish, almost like the water in the ancient tub. Now, you are recalling the events of being told that your mother has been involved in an accident and is dead. And when you're involved in the writing of this, or its recollection, you apparently recall thinking that the light in the room was brown, almost like the water in the ancient tub. It's a load of nonsense, isn't it? You wouldn't be thinking that. You'd be wondering, why is my dad in my bedroom in the middle of the night? What's going on? Has something happened? I don't understand. And indeed he does ask, what is it, Pa? But this is one of the themes, if you will, that I think we're going to see quite a lot of in this publication. This rewriting history to make it seem more dramatic, more romantic. Now, of course, it's being done to make the book more interesting for people as they read. But remember, it's an autobiography. It's not meant to be a novel. It's not meant to be a work of fiction, although large sections of it are bound to be. But the point is that with an autobiography, you're meant to be talking about events, how they happened, and your thoughts at the time, realistic thoughts, not, oh, the light reminds me of the colour of the water in the bathtub. That's just completely preposterous. And it's that type of thing that shows the sort of stylization that goes with this particular publication. We saw something of it already, talking about the indigo lake and the air being soft and the tulips popping, but that was more descriptive, not quite as nonsensical. Here, you just really would not make a comparison between the colour of the light in the room and the colour of the water that was invariably observed at Balmoral. It just doesn't stack up. And it belittles, in a way, what is a serious event. And in an interesting way, I think that's quite a useful barometer for the way that Harry and Harry's wife see the world. She because of her delusion, he because he's been pulled into the delusion. That it's all about this stylized version, sort of romanticized, Mills and Boon kind of thing, that it's all about swelling bosoms and ripping bodices. And as I mentioned in parts passing, where she recounts the supposed miscarriage, or the mythcarriage as it's become known, that her reactions and descriptions don't fit at all with somebody having a miscarriage, but instead it's like somebody who is 14 years old being asked, well, I think probably a 14-year-old do a better job, but in essence it's somebody being asked to, we want you to write about a miscarriage, but do it in the style of Pride and Prejudice or something. And therefore, it doesn't deal with the reality of the worry and the anxiety and the rushing to hospital, but rather making it sound all romantic and flowery, that I hummed a lullaby and I fell to the floor clutching Archie. You can picture it all in some piss-take parody of a romantic novel. But Harry and his wife fall into the trap of trying to make everything like that. And I suspect we're going to see this as a repeated theme. Now, at this juncture, I think that's still the influence of the ghostwriter, although perhaps Harry's wife is making her presence felt at an early juncture. We shall see. But returning to the publication, He explains that his dad sits down on the edge of the bed and says, "Darling boy, Mummy's been in a car crash." He then talks about waiting for his dad to get on and tell him with what's happened. And then he explains that his father looks down and then says, "There were complications. Mummy was quite badly injured and taken to hospital, darling boy." He always called me darling boy, but he was saying it quite a lot now. His voice was soft. He was in shock, it seemed. Now, interestingly, he then goes on to raise these questions. Did he mention paparazzi? Did he say she'd been chased? I don't think so. I can't swear to it, but probably not. The paps were such a problem for Mummy, for everyone. It didn't need to be said. Well, why have you said it then? It would appear that Charles never mentioned anything about the paparazzi. How would he necessarily know? He's probably just been told, your ex-wife has been killed in a car crash. That might have been all that he was told. He might not have been told that it was going at speed, might not have been told about the presence of paparazzi. And it's certainly not the first thing you're going to tell your son. Oh, by the way, your mum's been killed in a car crash and the paparazzi were chasing her. You just wouldn't say that. But notice that Harry's obsession that he has here with the paparazzi means that he has to bring it up to query, did he mention it? But actually, no, I don't think he did. But you've mentioned something that wasn't mentioned because of your own obsession with the paparazzi. And his father explains basically that his mother didn't make it. And he then explains that these phrases remain in my mind like darts in a board. And then he explains everything seemed to come to a stop. He can't remember what he said back to his father, and he does remember, however, that he didn't cry. He explains that his father didn't hug him, and explains that his father wasn't great at showing emotions under normal circumstances, which is, of course, is commensurate with the absence of emotional empathy that Charles has as a narcissist, and the fact that he isn't in a position to show that affection. That's the way that he functions. And it was mentioned by him that he said it's going to be okay. And then he stood and left. And Harry said that he basically stayed there, lying in bed. He didn't get up, he didn't bathe, he didn't get dressed, he didn't call out to his brother or his nanny. And he explains that he spent decades trying to reconstruct that morning. One wonders if a therapist has encouraged him to do so. And he basically says that he must have stayed in his room seeing nobody until 9 a.m. when a piper started to play. And then, rather strangely, he then talks about wondering wanting to remember what the bagpipe player played. The bagpiper played. And then he starts talking about how bagpipes can drive you mad. It's a very strange recollection of what has occurred, and it may well be the case that because of the trauma that he's experienced, he just simply can't remember what went on, and he just has these brief details. But it's interesting how he's able to remember that basically his father came in and sparingly gave him the information and wasn't particularly comforting. Maybe that is something that stood out for him. But it is interesting that, again, it is a criticism of Charles, and he can remember that, but isn't able to remember everything else. So that's the brief mention, in a way, of those circumstances of his mother's death, but undoubtedly there's an aftermath that we're going to hear about. Join me in the next video to understand more about Harry's thoughts and feelings in that regard.